I had my first panic attack in the year 2020. It was the first of many, along with very severe anxiety. And ultimately, what got me out of that was deepening my faith and consistent religious practices like prayer and going to church every Sunday. And we're going to get into that and a lot more. But before we do, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end of this video, check out the links in the description. All the disclaimers at the front. None of this is medical advice. If you're struggling with anxiety, I highly recommend talking to a professional about it. And just because this worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody else. I recognize that. However, there is scientific evidence that higher levels of religiosity and consistent religious practice is associated with lower levels of anxiety, depression, addiction, unaliving oneself ideation, and many, many other mental health issues. Now let me start at the beginning. So my first panic attack, basically what happened was this was during 2020 when everybody was locked down, which obviously led to a lot of mental health problems for many people, especially very young children. I had been struggling with feelings of shortness of breath for a long time. I think because it was talked about so much in the media as one of the symptoms of COVID, I started kind of imagining that I was suffering from that, or that I was having that symptom, and maybe I have COVID, or maybe I have asthma, or maybe I'm dying, I don't know. So one night, it was around 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I started feeling like I had shortness of breath. My heart was beating rapidly, and I felt like I was losing control of my body, my mind, and everything in between. It was not a great feeling, as I'm sure you could imagine. So what I did was I told my wife, let's go for a drive because I'm freaking out. I don't know what this is, but I think if I'm driving, I don't know what my thought process was, but I think it was just like, if I'm doing something menial where my attention is required, it's going to distract me from whatever I'm feeling right now and bring me out of my mind, kind of get me out of my head. But it didn't do that, and I don't recommend driving if you're having a mental health episode like that. Ultimately, what then ended up happening was I drove to a nearby hospital, and I thought I'll go in there and do like a emergency room kind of visit, see what happens. Maybe they'll find out what's wrong with me. But we get there and the hospital's closed. There is no emergency room to visit. And that made me freak out even more. So I called 911 and said, I think I'm having an asthma attack, or it might be COVID related. I don't know, but I can't breathe. I need somebody to come and help me right now. A fire truck and an ambulance show up pretty quickly. I was surprised. And embarrassingly, right as they're showing up, I feel better. I'm fine. And I'm like, oh, great. This is perfect. Somebody comes out of the fire truck and asks me, what's going on? Are you feeling okay? And I said, yeah, I kind of feel okay now. I think I'm okay. I feel better. Understandably, they were very annoyed. So the guy tells me, let's take your blood oxygen level. So he takes my blood oxygen level. It's normal. It's like 98%. And he says, look, everything seems to be fine with you. Your vitals are fine. Everything's okay. If you want to go to the emergency room, you can, but there's a lot of sick people in there, and you're probably going to get sick too if you go there. So I don't recommend that. And I said, no, it's okay. I think I'm fine. I don't know what that was. I'm sorry for wasting everybody's time. We all went about our lives, and understandably, like I said, they were very annoyed. And my wife was confused as well. Like, what just happened? What is this? And I was confused too. I have no idea. But I looked up the symptoms of what I was experiencing. It turned out it sounded a lot like a panic attack. And I talked to one of my cousins who has some experience in this world. She also has had panic attacks in the past. And she told me, yes, this was a panic attack. And not only, yes, was this a panic attack, but you're probably going to have many more of these, because usually when you have one, it's not an isolated incident. It means there's going to be more to come. Great. That's just what I want to hear. And she was right. I did have many, many more panic attacks, and it sucked. I hated it. But ultimately, what led me out of it was deepening my faith. Because I realized now that a lot of what my panic was not only my fear of death and all of the commotion going on about this global pandemic. That might have been what precipitated it, but underlying all of that was a lack of sense of identity and purpose and direction in my life. Because even though I was a Christian at the time, I was a pretty loose evangelical Christian who, I went to church most Sundays, but outside of that, didn't have a consistent prayer life. And I found that the spiritual life of evangelicalism or mainline Christianity, non-denominationalism, is very shallow. There's not a consistent prayer life that many people practice. And even attending church, while it's great, is pretty much optional for a lot of Protestants in that world, at least in my world that I was in. Everything felt very shallow, which is what ultimately led me to look into more historic forms of Christianity, which led me to Lutheranism and ultimately led me to Catholicism. And since looking into these more ancient forms of Christianity, especially Catholicism, I haven't struggled with this issue at all. And I think part of that is because Catholicism gives you an identity and a purpose and a direction in life, but also because it encourages you to just stop thinking about yourself at all and encourages you to think of yourself instead as part of a community, and also to put others before yourself, just like Jesus put us before himself. And that's the example we see in the saints like Saint Maximilian Kolbe, who was a Catholic priest during the times of World War II. He was imprisoned in Auschwitz, and while he was there, one of the prisoners escaped, and the common practice then was if a prisoner escaped, the Germans would take 10 other prisoners and starve them to death, and this was to discourage people from trying to escape because, if you escape successfully, you are basically ending the lives of 10 of your fellow prisoners. While they were picking prisoners to go starve to death, Saint Maximilian Kolbe offered to go in the place of one of the other prisoners who was selected. This just perfectly exemplifies the idea in Catholicism that you are to put others before yourself, even to the point of losing your life in the place of another. And this is the command that we see in the Bible when Jesus says of the two greatest commands, one of them is love God with all your strength and love your neighbor as yourself. And it's also what Jesus means when he says there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. What we see in the culture now is actually the opposite of this teaching. We see people who live by the idea that they should be put above other people, and the way that they know that they're successful in life is if other people respect them or fear them or envy them. And this is unfortunately a very common understanding of life nowadays, and it is the way that I lived before becoming a Christian, and even a little bit early on into my journey into Christianity. I was always worried about what other people thought of me. I always wanted to be respected, to be liked, to be envied, even if possible to be feared. And I also looked for my identity in my personal interests or hobbies, because you see people in movies, and characters in movies typically are identifiable by something they're very passionate about. For example, there might be a character in a movie who is an activist, and that kind of defines them as a character. Or there's a character in a movie who's really good with cars, and that defines them as a character. There's many, many examples you could find. One thing that comes to mind is Big Bang Theory. All the characters seem to identify with their area of study. And this was the way that I thought I was to find my identity, was I need to find something I'm passionate about, really throw myself into that, so that when other people look at me, they say, oh yeah, that's that activist person, or that's that outdoorsy person, or whatever example you want to use in there. But the problem with this way of thinking is that your identity is based on the validation of others. And because of that, you have to always be portraying this image of yourself that attracts the validation of others, which is a very unhealthy way to live, because you're just constantly seeking the validation of others. So you'll probably spend a lot of time on social media posting about these things, or you'll spend a lot of time in conversation just talking about these things, which is going to be very annoying for people, which I'm guilty of in the past, definitely. But instead, in Catholicism, what we are meant to find our identity in is in Christ and our place in the church and in our vocation in the church. Maybe we volunteer at the church, or maybe we are an RCIA instructor in the church or something like that, but we're all serving some purpose, and also our role in the family. So everybody knows what their role is in a certain context, and what they should be doing and what they should be striving towards. And it's all with the understanding that none of us is just a single individual believer on an island by ourselves practicing our own faith, separated from the rest of Christianity. The understanding in Catholicism is that you are part of a global family of Catholics, and not only global, but universal family of Catholics that is on earth and in purgatory and in heaven. In no way are you ever alone as a Catholic. Even when we pray, even if you're praying by yourself, if you're praying the rosary, one of the prayers in the rosary is the Our Father, which you might know by the title is Our Father. So it starts off, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And then later on you'll say, give us this day our daily bread. So there's no concept of I, give me this day my daily bread. That doesn't exist in any of the Catholic prayers. Similarly, if you look at the Hail Mary, it's pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. So there's this huge concept permeating all of Catholicism that we are not alone as Catholics. We're part of a huge family that spans from this life into the next. And we all know what our role is in that family. And this also greatly contradicts the prevailing notion of the times that
I'm an individual, this is my truth.
All of these nonsense platitudes that we hear nowadays, which really drive us to constantly be thinking about ourselves, what makes me happy, what validates my truth, what is my truth. Instead, Catholicism encourages us to get out of ourselves and to focus on the other, to serve the other, to love our neighbor as ourselves, which was a much more healthy attitude to have. Because if you're just thinking about yourself all the time and what makes you happy and whether or not you're happy right now, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And I know because I was there. And instead, my focus is more on what I can do for others, even if it makes me look small and weak and undesirable or unenviable, because ultimately that's what Christ looked like when he was doing his ultimate act of sacrifice for us. Weak and on a cross and being mocked and spit on and tortured. And his response wasn't, well, let me make myself look big and strong and scary to these people, or let me command the respect of these people, or let me win their favor in some way. It was instead to continue to serve them by dying, and instead of being wrathful against them, to say, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. That's also the mentality we see of many saints who have been killed for their faith. They don't fight to save their lives. They don't fight to save their reputations even. They willfully walk into their deaths, many times with joy. And I think that's a great example for us. I think there's too much focus nowadays on how can I make myself big? How can I make myself respectable and powerful? One example that comes to mind is whenever I watch reality TV shows like Selling Sunset or other similar shows, all the spin-offs, everybody is worried about their identity. And
like, I can't believe they betrayed me. I have to make sure that they know that they can't get away with this, because then I'll be seen as unrespectable or
whatever. And it's all about how can I make myself look bigger than the other person. When you think about all those people, they're all miserable. So obviously that's a philosophy of life that is not working. And instead what we should strive for is to make ourselves small and to serve others and to serve God ultimately. In doing that, we'll be fulfilling Jesus's two greatest commands, which are love God with all your strength and love your neighbor as yourself. So we'll be loving God if we serve God by going to church, by praying regularly, by being in communion with him in the Eucharist. And we will fulfill the second commandment by, like I said, making ourselves small in service of others. And in fulfilling these commandments, we will not be only having assurance of our destiny in the next life, but we'll also have a better life in this life. We'll be happier and we'll be more enjoyable to be around. And the science shows that we will have less mental health issues. For example, in this piece of scientific literature called Spirituality, Religiousness, and Mental Health, a review of the current scientific evidence, it shows a clear inverse correlation between mental health issues like depression, anxiety, addiction, unaliving oneself, ideation, and many other mental health issues, and higher levels of religiosity. So the more religious you are, the less likely you are to have these issues. So if you're somebody who's struggling with these issues, what can you start doing today to alleviate them in some way? The science shows that regular church attendance every Sunday is a huge help, and also regular prayer. So I recommend praying the rosary every day. That's what I do. And it's a game changer. It has literally changed my life in the short time that I've been doing it. And I highly recommend it. I think it'll do the same for you. But ultimately, like I said in the beginning, none of this is medical advice. If you're having an issue and you're noticing that none of this is helping, do seek help from a professional. But I think whether or not you get that help from a medication or from this on its own, this will give you a deeper purpose in life and a solid identity. And it will give you assurance of your destination in the next life. Anyways, that's the video. I made this because I know people who are struggling with anxiety, and this is the kind of advice that I give them. So I thought I would package it up into a nice video and send it out to the world. Hopefully this is helpful to people. If you're struggling with these things, let me know if you found help with these, or if you know somebody who has these kinds of issues, send them this video. Hopefully this helps them. But let me know your experience in the comments. Did it not help you maybe in the past? Did it help you in the past? Let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like down below. Subscribe to the channel here on YouTube and check out the links in the description. And until I see you next time, God bless.